My Lord. I rise to raise some reservations that I have about Amendments 501 and 502E on bullying in schools, and also 464 on the reporting of racism or faith-based bullying. Bullying is a label that has been subject to the phenomena of concept creep. Bullying has now expanded enormously and is an elastic phrase that can mean a wide range of behaviours can be described as bullying. And I fear that it's becoming a vehicle to encourage pupils to lack resilience, a point that's just been raised about the issue of resilience. How do we deal with it? This is an issue I've written about extensively, but for now, just to note that via anti-bullying initiatives in schools already, pupils are told, or even taught, that words hurt, that words damage, that words then can become interchangeable with violence, that name-calling is on a par with physical intimidation. And that inevitably can lead the young to believe that actually speech is violence, something which I think all of us can acknowledge is a problem that we have at the moment, when the people who say speech is violence then feel able to use violence in order to deal with speech they dislike, a very current issue. It's also the case in relation to this that harm can be subjectively defined as psychological, not physical harm. And we know that many of the problems that we have on, for example, university campuses is when students arriving from school feel that it's appropriate to no platform speakers whose views they consider to be psychologically harmful and interchangeable with violence. When words and speech are posited as the equivalent to physical force, I think it does create some problems, so we should at least consider that. It's also the case that the accusation of bullying can be weaponised, and regularly is, by the young, pointing their fingers at each other for bullying. So I just have some caution about an even more institutionalisation of anti-bullying initiatives into schools. I think we should at least look at this with a bit more critical thinking, because I think we have to look at the detail of the schemes that are being put forward. Not all of them are the same or of the same quality, and just because they say the words anti-bullying on them, we shouldn't just give them the nod, and we should think about it. Just one thing that I remember when a young family member from my own experience was hysterically crying because she was being so badly bullied at school. And you can imagine, we were all terrified. We had visions of her having her head kicked in, and it was awful, and she wouldn't tell us what it was. We eventually found out she hadn't been invited by her two friends to the pictures on a Friday evening. So I reassured her that she wasn't being bullied, and she wasn't to worry. And she brought back the school's anti-bullying policy, which had the words exclusion from friendship group, a very serious form of bullying. And she said, you see, you're wrong, I'm right, and so on and so forth. By the way, she made up with the friends. On Amendment 464, on the recording and reporting of racist or faith-based bullying in schools, I do worry about the real danger of treating young children as would-be racists, and I think we have to think very carefully about this. I thought the Noble Baroness Verma's contribution was incredibly interesting, and at the very least showed how complicated it is. It's not just a straightforward thing. Again, to just say we've got to fight racism in school, we've got to report racist incidents and so on, is not as straightforward as you'd think. Young children in particular are unencumbered by the adult fixations on race, and I do worry about the danger of mislabelling pupils and so on. There was an interesting report, and film and book, in fact, written by researcher Adrian Hart on this very topic a few years ago. And one of the interesting things that Adrian Hart noted was that a reporting regime can create a self-fulfilling prophecy with a growing list of incidents being written down as evidence of racism. And one of the reasons why that happened was that the schools were getting into trouble, that they hadn't got enough incidents of racism written down, and therefore they were ignoring racism, and they were literally going around hunting the racism to add to the list to prove how diligent they were being. I do want to note, of course, that children can behave cruelly. Often they fall out a lot, they do call each other names. I'm not trying to say it's all an enjoyable time, but I think that there is a danger of sometimes seeing the crass language that children use and so on as racist. And I do think the fact that the teachers who recently reported a child wearing a Union Jack dress to school had recently been on a racial literacy course is an indication of the fact that maybe things aren't all so well. In that sense, anti-racism education is itself contentious. Some schools, increasing numbers of schools in fact, do deploy anti-racist strategies, and they have adopted uncritically, for example, critical race theory. They argue that a colour-blind approach, i.e. not focusing on skin colour, is itself racist. They parrot the line that there is white privilege, and for many young white children that can be guilt-inducing. In other words, it's a dangerously politicised area, and we should at least consider that. I just want to finish off by saying I broadly support the group of amendments from the Noble Baroness Barron, who importantly suggests reports on the impact of behaviour on school children and behaviour of school children on teacher recruitment, and the impact of such behaviour on educational outcomes. Because I said at second reading that behaviour is a hugely challenging issue at schools at present, and I don't think it's given them much attention. So I'd hope that we can tackle that. But one problem that I do think we face is a kind of cultural assault on discipline per se. I mean, those people who advocate discipline in schools can be described as authoritarian, enjoying meting out cruel punishments on pupils, and in fact can be accused of bullying children. The very term is used regularly by those who argue for discipline in schools. And even as I say the word discipline, I can feel a kind of frizz on of people thinking I mean get out the stick or anything. I simply mean adult authority. And the truth is that adult authority per se is under attack in many ways, which is why I think it's so important that we have Amendment 502YV on the presumption against the reinstatement of children engaging in extremely serious behaviour, and on 502YYA on the right to exclude. Because I actually think that teachers need to have those tools in their educational toolbox. I think it's only fair on pupils that they know that there are lines that they can't cross. I think that adult authority in schools is in crisis, and we should do everything we can to bolster it, not undermine it.